So today I'm going to be making another true crime ASMR video, and I'm going to be talking about the case of Pazuzu Algarad. And some of you may be familiar with this person. I know that Sarian made a video about him, and I became aware of his case from the Vice documentary called The Devil You Know, and it's very good. I think it's actually a docu-series, and if you look it up on YouTube, I believe the full docu-series should be on there. So I'm just gonna get right into it. So also, if you're clicking, it's from my laptop, and I'm using this tiny mic that I bought, and I don't know how well it's working. I tested it out, but it was pretty cheap, so I don't know how well it actually works, but okay. So, Pazuzu Algarad was born John Alexander Lawson. Yeah, Pazuzu Algarad was not his real name, obviously. And he was born on August 12th, 1978. So he was a Leo, and he was an American murderer responsible for killing two men. And he legally changed his name to Pazuzu Algarad in 2002 to conform with his satanic beliefs. The name Pazuzu comes from the movie The Exorcist. It was the name of the demon that possessed Regan. Is it Regan or Regan? I forget her name. Regan or Regan in The Exorcist. And he was also, before he was claiming to be a Satanist, or after, I'm not sure if it was before or after, he was telling people that he was Muslim. So he kind of just liked to draw attention to himself. And as time goes on, you will see this become more and more clear, that he really liked to get attention, even though it was negative for the most part. So I'm reading from a couple different articles, by the way. I'm reading from Wikipedia, and then also one from allthat'sinteresting.com and one from investigationdiscovery.com. Okay, so him and his mother, Pazuzu and his mother, moved to North Carolina to a town called Clemens, and this town was very religious, and it was just a kind of smaller town, but everyone was super religious and conservative for the most part. So he began to use drugs and alcohol at a pretty young age. He was diagnosed with several mental illnesses, including schizophrenia and agoraphobia, at a young age, and his mother, Cynthia, got him psychiatric help, but eventually she started to run out of money and she could no longer afford to get this treatment for him. And I just think that this is so sad and fucked up that this happens a lot. People just can't afford to get the help that they need or get the help that their loved ones need, and it's just so sad to think that maybe all of this could have been prevented if he could have just gotten further treatment. I mean, who's to say if he could have just eventually done it anyway, but it's just very, very sad. And his mom was kind of oblivious to what ends up happening, or at least she tries to make it seem like she didn't really know what was going on. So essentially, his mother and him were living at a house, and the house eventually became a literal hellhole, and Pazuzu just kind of took it over. So I've seen different accounts of stories about the mother. So some people or some articles have said that she was barely ever at this house, and then I've seen other articles saying that she was there sometimes. She would kind of come and go, and I believe she had a boyfriend or something that she stayed with. But if she knew what was happening in this house, I don't think that there's any way in hell that she had a full idea, because this house was absolutely vile. And there's actually body cam footage on YouTube that came from police officers when they went into the home, and you can see how trashed it is. I mean, people would shit on the floor, they would piss on was blood everywhere. So he had some friends that he ended up making that were other kind of outcasts in the area, that didn't conform to the religious beliefs of others in the area. And eventually, this place just became their dungeon. Basically, they would just do drugs and drink all night and, whatever, and then they would just end up shitting all over the floor, how that always happens. But, so yeah, it was just a very disgusting place, and I can't even imagine the fucking smell. I mean, I know that the police officers said that it was a smell like nothing they had smelled before, and they could smell it on the porch, and I'm sure it went all the way down the block. It's just so disgusting. So yeah, the house was at 2749 Nob Hill Drive, and it became a hub of outcasts and misfits, and they could come and stay for as long as they wanted to. He did not give a fuck about this house. He let anyone and everyone do whatever they wanted in this house. And it says activities at Algarad's home included self-harm, drinking the blood of birds, performing rabbit sacrifices, doing copious amounts of drugs, and staging orgies. Just, fun times at Pazuzu's. And there were animal carcasses everywhere. There was blood smeared all over the walls, garbage, decay. There was, obviously mold. It was so disgusting. And eventually they did demolish this house because the police officers, or the investigators, deemed it as uninhabitable. And obviously it's uninhabitable. That is the understatement of the century. Okay, so then it gets into the actual crimes that happened and how Pazuzu was connected. So, to kind of go back, basically, he's this outcast living in North Carolina. He has obvious mental health issues that were not addressed properly. He has a group of friends that, do these nefarious activities with him. And also, he would just randomly mention to some of these friends that there were dead bodies in his basement, and I guess they just either didn't believe him and thought he was just being, scary or whatever, or they just didn't care because they didn't really check. So in 2010, he was charged with accessory after the fact of involuntary manslaughter, and that came after the body of Joseph Chandler was discovered in Yadkin County, and he was accused of concealing information from investigators and allowing a murder suspect to stay at his house. And then when he was 35, him and his fiancée, Amber Birch, who was 24, they were both arrested after the investigators found skeletal remains of two men in Algarad's backyard after they dug it up. And these men were identified as Joshua Wetzler and Tommy Dean Welch, and they both had disappeared in 2009. And I remember I couldn't really find a lot of information about Tommy Welch, but Josh Wetzler, he had a child, and his estranged girlfriend or wife, I don't remember if they were married, but they were separated at the time of his disappearance. She ended up reporting him as missing, and it's just so sad because he seemed like he was a really good guy and a good father. He just kind of got lost, and he ended up in Pazuzu's clutches, and it seemed like he maybe had some issues with drugs, and I'm sure he just kind of ended up, being lured in somehow by Pazuzu. Just very sad. And shortly after the arrest of Algarad and Birch, Algarad's other fiancé, so yes, he had two fiancés. He was quite the ladies' man. This was 28-year-old Crystal Matlock, and she was charged in connection with the death of one person whose body was found, and she was suspected of helping with the burial of Wetzler. It is alleged that Algarad killed Wetzler in July 2009, and Birch had helped to bury his body. Meanwhile, Birch allegedly killed Tommy Welch, in October 2009, and Algarad helped with the burial. Both of the men died result of a gunshot wound to the head. And soon after the remains were found on the property, this is when the housing officials deemed the home to be unlivable, uninhabitable, and it was demolished, and the neighbors were absolutely thrilled. And for obvious reason, I mean, this house was not only an eyesore, but also stunk to high heaven. And I'm sure that they were just like, what the fuck is going on in this house? So, in the early hours of October 28th, 2015, Pazuzu Algarad was found dead in his prison cell at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the death was ruled as a suicide because he bled out as a result of a deep cut on his left arm, and the instrument that he used remains unknown, but people think that he used his teeth to bite into his arm, because when he was really fucked up on meth, he filed his teeth down to be pointy. So that was one of his fun activities that he did while high on meth. So I think he just, bit into his arm and bled out. So then, on March 9th, 2017, Amber Birch pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, armed robbery, and accessory after-the-fact murder. Tommy Dean Welch had reportedly been at Algarad's home along with Birch and others, and the prosecutors said that Birch shot him twice in the head with a rifle as he sat on the couch. Birch was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years and a maximum of 39 years. And then Crystal Matlock pleaded guilty to conspiracy to accessory after the fact to first-degree murder. I feel like that was worded weird, but whatever. On June 5th, 2017, and she was sentenced to a minimum of 3 years and a maximum of 4 years in prison. And that is all that's on the all that's interesting page. So, yeah, essentially, he ended up committing suicide in prison. He took the cowardly way out. And, he never really, he was in prison, so I guess he got to serve at least some time, but, yeah, it's absolutely, that pretty much sums it up. Like I said, I highly recommend watching the Vice documentary, or the docu-series called The Devil You Know. It's really good, and also Bailey Sarian's video on him is really good as well. So, yeah, it's absolutely horrible, this whole situation, and I could have gone into a lot more detail, but I didn't want to make this video super long. It's obviously very tragic that these men lost their lives for just no reason. Other than the fact that this guy was just batshit. And yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So that is all for now.